I just attended Omega's Planet Ocean event in New York City last night, and I cannot believe I'm saying this, but Omega is going to the moon again. What is up, Watch fam? I am Christian, the curator of the Theo and Harris Vintage Watch Shop.
My name is Michael. This video is sponsored by Fake Fragrances.
More on them later. I went to the Omega's Planet Ocean event last night, and
Yes.
and I learned a bunch. I learned a lot about essentially, three things, right? About history, Omega history.
Sure.
I learned a lot about Omega culture and intent, and I learned a lot about Omega's future.
They're called the Pioneer brand for a reason.
For a reason.
Yes.
So where do you want to start? History, culture, or future? I guess in the order that I laid it out. That
Yeah, I
makes
think it was a
most
beautiful
sense,
order.
right?
You saw my favorite watch of all time.
I did, and I sent you a picture, which
you
was
did.
adorable. I was like, hey, thinking of you. So let's start there. One of the most interesting things that I learned yesterday was about Omega's Marine watch, which is kind of one of the original dive watches, the original tank.
Sealed with leather and cork, I think.
Yeah, and I didn't actually know that. That's one of the first things that I learned.
Yeah.
At Omega Marine, these watches that not so long ago you could get on eBay for what?
$2,000, $3,000.
$2,000 to $5,000, and have now become like collectible. Like you can't get these watches anymore.
People are trying to rebuild the bracelets, the bands, the boxes. Like
100%.
It's that kind of thing.
And they were so undervalued then. And I know that you love them, and now they're a little bit. You should have bought one then,
yeah,
right?
We should have bought one. Yeah.
But what was so interesting was like looking into like the history of development and kind of like technology. Leather and cork was sealing this watch. Like they didn't have gaskets.
Yeah, they had no idea what they were doing.
Cork, like, and where did they test this watch? Not in a modern pressure testing machine. They tested it in Lake Geneva and Lake Neuchâtel.
There's a picture of a guy. I don't remember the picture perfectly, but like in the most rudimentary scuba diving or just I guess underwater gear you could imagine, just like checking a watch. It's
amazing.
Like, wow, that is the beginning. That is the movie scene, not what we see now, scientists and stuff like that, or scientific tools. Just a dude being like,
amazing.
Good. Yeah.
Amazing. So that was one of the first things that I learned. Another thing that I learned last night, I got to see Elvis's watch and JFK's watch. Wow. I know.
What Omega did Elvis wear?
Oh, Elvis wore an Omega that I actually watched get auctioned off, I believe, at Phillips a couple of years ago for a couple of $1 million. I think $1.8 million, I believe it was.
Wow.
And it's an Omega, I think it's a DeVille with a diamond bezel and a Tiffany stamp.
Oh, that's nice.
Yeah, super cool watch. I think that watch without the Elvis provenance is probably a $4,000 or $5,000 watch.
Yeah, I'd see that in the
$5,000 watch, exactly.
Yeah.
But with the Omega, with the Elvis provenance, it's close to $2 million, which is pretty wild. Wow. And that was neat. I didn't learn a lot about the Omega brand from that watch. I already knew about this watch, but still, seeing the Elvis watch is incredible.
That is,
right?
yeah.
Now the story that I did learn was about JFK's watch. So JFK's watch is permanently in the Omega Museum in Bienne, Switzerland. Okay?
It's not a tank, which is a common misconception because they're also confusing it with Jackie's watch. Mrs. Onassis, Mrs. Kennedy.
Thank you.
Get out of here. This video is sponsored by Fake Fragrances. Fake Fragrances is essentially you don't pay all of this money for a name brand fragrance. You get a generic version.
Whereas here in the fragrance world, I firmly do not believe anyone's trying to be someone they're not. I don't think that when someone puts on a cologne or a fragrance from Fake Fragrance, they are attempting to mislead or deceive somebody on a date or in a meeting. That's ridiculous. Who's going to notice that? And frankly, I think if someone did, if in the rare 1 in a million chance someone's like, hey, is that XYZ, fragrance, which I've never heard anyone do in public ever, right? They're just like, wow, that guy smells good.
I can't even get people close to me.
That guy smells good. That's all people know. Whereas it's like, oh, is that guy's wearing a Rolex? He's rich. It's a $40,000 Rolex he's wearing, right? It's Rolex. Whereas with fragrance, like, that guy just smells so good. And yeah, sure, they're replicating the formula, I suppose, from these companies and delivering this incredible product to you at a low price. I think it's fantastic. I think it delivers a lot of value, and frankly, I think you're going to be walking around with fragrances just smelling good. That's it. Not pretending to be anyone you're not, just smelling good, and that's good enough for me. Period. End. Folks often think that John F. Kennedy wore a Cartier tank.
Yes.
And you're right. They do think that. One, because it looks a hell of a lot like one.
Yes, it does.
But two, because his wife, Jacqueline, also wore a Cartier tank. She wore a Cartier tank Normal. I actually sold one just yesterday from the Theo and Harris shop.
Oh, to Kim Kardashian.
And not to Kim Kardashian, but it is the kind of a Kim K watch.
What did it say on the back again? Do you remember?
It was in memory of a long walk. And they marked off the time and the location.
Unbelievably
It was a gift
cool.
to Jackie Kennedy. It was kind of cool. Anyway, I didn't know the history of this watch. This watch was given to John F. Kennedy as a gift, okay? And it was given to him before he won the presidency. Okay, and it was given to him with the inscription on the back. I'm paraphrasing, but essentially congratulating him on winning the presidency.
Whoa!
Which very much reminds me of the gift that President Bush Sr. was given. He was given a Patek Philippe perpetual calendar with a beautiful hobnail bezel.
One of my favorite watch engravings of all time.
Yep, and that watch was engraved "Happy 100th birthday" before he hit 100. Right. Really neat. I love that. I love celebrating, like being the person that says, I believed in you so much that I put it in metal.
Right.
That's cool. And of course with the 100 thing, it's a little bit more of a gesture. The presidential thing is actually a pretty big bet. Like that's kind of tough.
That watch is either a big remembrance of shame or the coolest thing you've ever gotten to enjoy.
Exactly. So I never thought I'd see this watch because it's on permanent installment in Switzerland.
Sure.
But what I really learned about this that just made the space story so special, and I didn't know this, maybe you did. President Kennedy wore that watch when he gave the speech at Rice.
We are going to go to the moon.
And he promised that by the decade's end that we would be on the moon.
Wow.
So Omega, the brand, was there from the moment President Kennedy made that promise, that grand promise to the American public.
Wow.
And then they were in the moon.
On the moon.
On the moon.
Common misconception.
In the moon, inside the moon, by decade's end.
Wow. That's cool.
Fucking A, man. And
that's cool.
It's arguable. Forget about the moon. Like, it's arguable that it's like that's the most American watch brand I've ever seen in my life now. Like, that's it. Like, I don't know. I felt like the moon thing is one thing. That's like a technical thing. It's a technical supremacy thing, sure. But it's like this was the choice of the greatest race we've ever been involved in, right? Like from beginning to end.
Wow.
From characters completely dissimilar, right? Like I don't know how much John F. Kennedy had in common with Wally Schirra. I don't know. Speaking of Wally Schirra, walked right down 2 feet away from President Kennedy's watch, and I got to see Wally Schirra's Speedmaster.
Whoa.
Straight lug Speedmaster, the first Omega in space. Why is it there? Well, because he bought it with his own money. It wasn't NASA issued.
Oh, because NASA took all the watches back.
Of course. His own money. It's kind of cool.
Wow.
Freaking neat.
Wow.
You know, I was a kid last night. I was such a kid in a candy shop. Like, you know, and it's not just seeing the watches. Like, it's hearing the history. And what was so special, too, was like, you know, I was speaking to a couple of, I don't know if I should say names or whatever, but you know who you are. And
John F. Kennedy. I'm like, wait, what?
Folks that were showing me around the exhibit. The wealth of knowledge that some folks have about this brand, like, is... And all of their respective brands is so impactful, and it makes the story so much more compelling. And kind of my message to the brand then and today on the internet is like those people. You know, I am very much an advocate for tighter bonds between brands and content creators.
Yes.
The bond is pretty broken at the moment. I think it's a big mistake.
Yes.
And we'll get into it a little bit later towards the end of this episode. I have I think something pretty compelling to talk about on the subject, and the brand, it's kind of broken. The content creators are not being fed the information that they ought to be. Content creators are not being focused by the brands, not just Omega, but all brands, the way they ought to be, the way that the brands have the resources to.
I will also jump in and say I think brands are terrified of content creators in a way too, because it's not a typical commercial, which you can hop into later.
Yeah.
But from my end on the snail, I have had 4 major American brands, you would know every single brand by name, be really excited to work with me, and I ask one wrong question. I asked a brand about the construction of something going around their boot.
It's over.
Nothing. Won't answer my call, sent me like a couple $1,000s in boots, have not answered me, will not answer me, will not reach back out. And I'm like, I'm not trying to hurt you guys. I want to talk about it.
I think that you're exactly right. Brands are afraid of content creators, and I understand why, because content creators are not on the payroll yet.
Yep.
And they can kind of say whatever they want, and they don't need to go through corporate approval because you're not a sponsor.
That's also why people like content creators too, which makes it tough.
Right, but the answer to that is not avoiding it and giving them fewer resources. The answer is bringing them closer, right? So that you can make them more predictable. You can make them more informed, more malleable, maybe, right? You can have a larger influence on them, and it's not just with money, but it's also with just giving them the information to get excited about a brand. Like speaking to some of the folks at Omega last night was incredible. I'm kind of entering into the culture conversation, and I want to go back into the watch stuff for just a second.
Yeah.
But there was just a couple of just incredible watches. I saw an Omega, I think it was an Aquaterra Tourbillon that was just incredible.
Whoa.
In 18 karat canopus white gold. I saw an 18 karat Speedmaster with a black onyx dial and not meteorite, lunar meteorite subdials, which are it's not the same thing, right? It's a totally different material. It's got this real dark color, and looking at it, you're like, I know that's in the meteorite family, but that looks different. Like, it was just
I've never met the meteorite family.
Yeah, exactly. It was just so cool to be there and to see all these watches. And now going back into the culture conversation, which we kind of started before, Omega did a great job at this exhibit, fostering culture. They did a great job.
Yeah. We've talked about that before. Like, you know about a brand, but when you see their museum, when you talk to them, you're like, wow, that is unbelievable. I love this brand.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. It was really nice. It was great access to inventory, right, or historical pieces. Great integration into new stuff. I would say the last watch specifically that I wanted to talk about before we get into like the larger culture and future conversation, because those conversations meld a little bit.
Yeah.
Is I saw the Planet Ocean Ultra Deep Professional. The story behind this watch is just incredible. This is the watch that made it to Mariana Trench.
You saw the one that did it?
Oh yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
Cool.
Latched onto the robotic arm that it's supposed to be attached to when it did go down. I heard the whole story about how this was never supposed to be a marketing effort. This was Victor Vescovo, just being a watch enthusiast, walking into a Omega boutique, kind of wanted to get a watch, and then one thing led to another, and they're like, how about we make you a watch?
Oh, okay.
And then it was just, they made a custom watch. They made this watch for the Mariana Trench in 6 weeks. They designed the watch that would go the deepest in the world in 6 weeks.
Wow!
And I think the coolest watch. I think that this was legitimately one of the coolest watches I've ever seen.
That's also a testament.
I think it was way better than the Rolex Deep, that ultra deep.
Oh, this looks much better. But that's also a testament. 6 weeks means they do a lot of stuff, even more in-house than in-house brands say, because that turnaround time is very, very fast.
Full force. It was unbelievable.
Wow.
Straps, as many of you should know, bring a whole world of potential to mix up your watch collection. They breathe new life into watches. They help you pull out different colors. They give them new personality. Straps can be very addictive. I know people with 2 watches and 10 straps because it adds so many facets to a collection in a fairly easy and fun way. So that's why they become such a part of the Theo and Harris culture and identity. I think we sell more exotic straps than almost anybody because I just love them so much and I love sharing them with you.
And that's fascinating because a lot of brands, even if their stuff is in-house, they sometimes have to go to external partners. That takes a lot of time. That speaks on Omega's culture to do everything.
Exactly. And the whole experience is culturally immersive. I mean, there were speakers. There was Kaya Gerber and Cindy Crawford, and they speak extremely highly of Omega and their relationship with Omega. I do wish, constructive criticism, I wish that, some of the questions were a little bit more about the brand. And I know that Cindy Crawford can speak in more detail about the brand itself, not just her experience with the brand and how lucky she was to travel. Again, the interviewee is only as, not to say the interviewer wasn't good, I don't mean to imply that, but the questions could have even dug into the Omega relationship or the Omega bond a little bit further. I don't know how intimately involved or knowledgeable Kaya is. I just don't know. I just don't know the answer to that question. Well, I do think if the answer is yes, then it's a shame that they didn't ask her to go a little bit further. Right. And if the answer is no, well, that could be solved so quickly, and I'm sure that she would be thrilled to, because I know that she loves the brand, and I know that she looks at it as a part of like an extension of her family. I mean, Cindy Crawford's been with the Omega brand as an ambassador for 35 years. That is insane. Wow. It's insane.
Yeah.
So long story short, you could have just prepped her a little bit more if she didn't know. If she did know, she should have spoken, and if she didn't, there could have been a conversation.
Give her some questions to get a little deeper.
For sure. I'm sure she's a very smart young woman, and she totally. You know what it is? I think that people underestimate the power of of a little bit of fluency. They think that just because it's Kaya Gerber, we're going to be impacted, and plenty of folks were for sure.
Yeah.
But I would love to see every drop of water squeezed out of the opportunity. I know that sounds a little bit bad. I want to wrap my finger in it. It's such a weird way to put that. What I meant was, I just hate leaving opportunity on the table, right?
Yeah.
And I'm sure she's bright, and she's certainly very kind. And the whole point is she's a model, right? So she's clearly pretty. But I think that the real point should be that I have no doubt that she can speak fluently about this brand, and I would love to hear her do so. I'd love to hear all ambassadors do so. Right? George Clooney does a really good job at speaking about Omega, like about the brand, not just about what they've done for him, the vacations they've gone on, but about the brand. But long story short, I'm nitpicking. Omega did an incredible job at this exhibit. I was so glad to be there. I was so happy to see everybody. And my point is, the future is Omega's going to the moon. And Omega is showing serious investment, not only of capital, but of history and of real resources, of real knowledge, of real passion. This is not just like hey, we're going to throw a party at the Omega boutique and everyone get dressed up and we're going to drink champagne.
This is a very serious, this is what we're doing, this is who we are, this is how we're pushing
100%. And I believe in them. I believe in them completely. I was asked multiple times last night if I'm going to get an Omega, and it's easy to start committing to things when you're when you're hanging out and everyone's very happy.
When Kaya Gerber's asking you,
exactly. And the truth is, I really would like to get an Omega in the next. I'd love to buy an Omega. I'd love to buy an Omega before Christmas. Right? I'd love to buy an Omega, and I really feel very close to the brand. And it was my grandfather wore when he wore a watch, and I'd love to get a Speedmaster, obviously, and I'd love to get an Omega.
So, what are your final thoughts on
yellow
2024?
Yeah, glad you asked. I was waiting.
Yellow,
is he kidding?
yellow.
Of course, yellow.
Probably white too, but I have to get the yellow first.
Yeah.
Okay.
No.
Thoughts on 2024? Big releases, big new things coming.
I don't know what's coming. I'm not privy at all to like the pipeline. But I know that they're listening very closely to the customers, to the world. I saw so many of the new, like the Aqua, what is it, the Seamaster Celebration, the blues.
Oh yeah.
I saw so many this week.
Really?
Oh my God.
Really?
So many, and I was so happy to see them because I think they're amazing. And the different people from different the walks of life, seeing them wearing them was so cool. I saw attorneys from Chicago. I saw a principal from Brooklyn. I saw so many different people wearing these watches, and I was like, wow, Omega's really hitting a broad base well.
Yeah.
Really impressive.
I assume, because the reason I keep saying Pioneer brand lately is because I watched a video where Swatch basically says like Omega is positioned as the Pioneer brand. And I think last year, maybe the year before, maybe I'm screwing up the years, Omega did a fantastic job of showing that off at ungettable watches, like the chiming Speedmaster and everything like that, the tribute to their original stopwatch. Unbelievable stuff. And I was like, yeah, that is very pioneering. But in terms of pioneering for the masses, I think that is what we'll probably see next. Totally. Because we saw like, wow, you guys can build unbelievable stuff. And now I think it'll be through refinement of some bracelets, maybe changing some things, thinning some things, probably not crazily, but being labeled as that brand that has to push things forward. They showed it last year, high end. I think now lower end we'll start to see. Honestly, I don't even know where, but probably this is we'll get into different materials, like on their lines more, not just the Aquaterra collection, maybe a titanium Speedmaster or something like that. That's what I think is coming next.
Totally agree. I think the future is so bright for the brand. I'm rooting for them. They're incredible. I'm a lifelong Omega lover, so this is not news. But yeah, I'm just very happy because listen, what's good for Omega? Omega doing well means the watch community is better served. That's it, right? It means our passion is richer, like that's the beauty of like industry like this. It's like Omega is incentivized to push the boundaries further. So they do it for their own self-interest, right? Naturally, it's a profitable company, but we're the ones that benefit. Because they're being rewarded for good behavior, and then we get rewarded, right? Because they're rewarded. It's amazing. It's just this perpetual motion of watches getting better. Like that's it.
So
and to think about the rut that they came from 12 years ago, 10 years ago, it's insane. It was amazing being there.
So last thing that I'll hit you with.
Yep.
if I could.
And when I said go to the moon, I meant it in more of an anecdote, right? You guys understand that?
Yeah, of
Okay.
course.
I don't think I'm not telling you Omega's going to the moon again.
They could be,
but
though.
they're going to the moon, baby.
But they might be going to the moon. You don't know. I like the Ed White. Obviously, I've talked about it a lot. The inside of the movement is actually made of Sedna gold, which is incredible.
Amazing.
I would love to see this year. Well, two things. Number one, do you think taking a heritage model like the Ed White, essentially, remaking it in a much more luxurious way is a form of pioneering your vintage models? That's one question I'll land you. The second thing is, if there's anything you'd like to see this year, what would it be? I would like to see the Ed White watch not have a Sedna gold movement, just so it's more accessible. It doesn't have to be handmade by one watchmaker. Would love to see that just be added to the collection. I don't think it will be.
Yeah.
But for me, that's not really pioneering. That is reissuing. But I would love to see that. But I want to hit you with both those questions. What would you love to see? And do you think bringing back those heritage models and changing them is a form of pioneering?
For sure. I think that what I'd like to see from Omega is totally within the realm of reasonable. I'd love to see Omega have a lot of fun with their colors. I mean, I don't think the Aquaterra needs to be reinvented. It's a great watch. I think it's arguably it's kind of perfect.
I'd say that's the most modern looking watch too.
I don't think the Speedmaster needs to be really edited. It's pretty much perfect. So I feel the same way about the Pro Plof, right? I feel the same way about so many of these watches. I think that they're great. I don't have much to change on the material level or anything, right? I'd like to see them just have fun with color and keep using like this laser technology that they're so good at. I think it's amazing.
Oh, you mean with engraving?
Oh,
like
it's
the
wild.
earth and stuff on the Aquaterra?
It's wild.
Yeah.
Do it more on movements. Do it more on rotors. I mean, just do stuff like that. That stuff's crazy.
That's where it gets really interesting because AP did that with the Spider-Man watch.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, Omega, you could do it at a cheaper price. You don't have to make Marvel characters, but like go nuts with that.
Yeah.
Like, show us, instead of like the beauty of Paddock is their enameling process, all done by hand.
Yeah.
Show us the modern version of that. How crazy can you get?
Totally.
I want to see both extremes.
Totally. I mean, I would love to see Omega do, maybe a program, maybe a kind of custom program where you can't customize the watch per se, but maybe there is like you're bringing up like AP, like Longa. Maybe you can do a custom element engraved in the movement, like whether it's a balance cock or something. Again, that's ridiculous, and it would only be it would be allocated the same way as Snoopy's allocated, or the same way that Ned White is allocated,
of
right?
course.
But I think that people would take a $7,000 Speedmaster and spend another $4,000.
Yeah,
forget about just like the value of the sale. It's also about like now your Speedmaster. You're actually giving someone the option to make a Speedmaster an extremely desirable, a basic Speedmaster, like a super luxury experience.
Wow.
You
Okay.
know?
Yeah. That's, I was struggling to think of a way that they could move something forward besides case materials or stuff like that. But taking that process that watchmakers have done for a very long time and will continue to do, and that's part of the beauty of watchmaking, and making that a modern thing.
Yep.
Would be insane.
Totally.
Now, instead of you get
insane.
your piece unique, you do that with Omega. It costs a lot more money,
Of
but
course,
we're going to do it. It's lasered. It's not done by hand, but it's also not an extra $80,000.
Exactly.
Like, here you go.
Totally,
Wow.
Totally agree.
That's cool.
An amazing future for the brand. That's it. If you guys like this episode, like it, subscribe to our channel, and if you want more content, you want to be a part of our private little community for watch enthusiasts, go down below into the link and click on the 0. If you do join, shoot me a DM. I'd love to chat watches with you. I can't answer all the comments on YouTube, but I can talk to you over there. So I hope to see you on over there. The watch on your wrist, unlike your iPad, will mean something to someone one day if it doesn't already. Something that will make them smile, walk a little taller, surely at some point cry, but it will mean something.